Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Magdalia Gomez, and I'm joined by my colleague Sarah Scruggs, and we're excited to welcome you to our presentation today to have a conversation about money management for elders and their caregivers. We have a lot that we're going to cover, but I also want to just let you know this is really going to have today's presentation be a conversation throughout. So we're here to answer questions you may have. If we don't know the answer to something, which is bound to happen, elder care is very complex, we will take that question and we will get back to you with an answer. So feel free, if you do have any questions, to let us know. As I said, I'm Magdalia Gomez. I am our Community Engagement Manager here at the Harvard University Employees Credit Union, and Sarah Scruggs will be presenting the second half of today's session. And she and I are going to, as I said, have a conversation. So throughout, Sarah will give some insights from her experience, also from her research, and I will also do the same during Sarah's section. And we hope that you will do the same and utilize the chat so that we can all learn from each other. So a little bit about logistics. We've been doing webinars for a long time, and I'm sure you've been going to different webinars or different Zoom events, so you're pretty, I'm assuming most of you are pretty comfortable or know how these webinars work. So I'll just go through it really quickly, but you have been muted. That means that if you are having lunch or if you're at home or maybe there's construction happening outside, you never know, we won't hear it. So don't feel bad. Life happens and we understand. With that, we also may have background noise, and if we do, we apologize, but let us know if it ever does get to the point that you cannot hear us. We are going to use the questions feature. That way we make sure we're addressing anything that may come up. And just to get us started, to test it out and to get to know a little bit more about you, please let us know, are you joining today's presentation for your own personal knowledge as an elder, or because you will be you are or will be a caregiver? This will help us better understand, better address some of the questions, and it'll help us, we'll do our best to address both if you're the elder or if you're a caregiver, but knowing sort of the breakdown will give us a good understanding. So if you wouldn't mind, please using the questions feature. Are you joining as an elder and getting the information for yourself, or are you joining as a caregiver? Okay, so I see lots of folks, mostly are caregivers. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And some people are telling me who you're caring for. Thank you for letting me know. I see someone that said that they're a caregiver for their dad. Thank you. And please feel free to continue. It's wonderful. I see someone that's joining for themselves. Thank you. This is going to be a good conversation. We have people on both sides, so that way we can learn from each other. And if something is missed, someone from the other group can bring it up as well. Thank you. The presentation will be emailed to everyone. So by just registering, you're going to have access to this recording and the presentation. And also, as I said, if there are questions that come up, which is bound to happen, there's a lot, as I said, elder care can be it is complex. There's so many different components. So a question may come up. If Sarah and I don't know the answer, we will take that question down, do some research, and provide the answer in the follow-up email that we will send. And we also do have a survey. Let us know what you're thinking. This presentation is one that we put together for this year. So it's a new presentation for 2021. And we put this presentation together specifically because we were getting a good amount of questions from our members, from our community. What can I do with elder care? I'm myself getting older. What should I know? So if you have feedback as to other topics you want us to cover, or just in general, maybe you came in here wanting one type of content covered and we didn't cover as much, let us know. We appreciate, and this is how we grow as presenters, and we're able to provide better content for everyone. So talked a lot about the logistics, but some of you may not be members of the credit union, so you may not know who we are. So I'll do a quick intro as to who we are before getting into the content. We are Harvard University Employees Credit Union, or HUECU for short, and we are the financial institution for the Harvard community, including all of the students, staff, different staff at the teaching hospitals, alumni, and community partners that we have as well throughout the Harvard community. The difference between a credit union and a bank is that a credit union is a not-for-profit institution. So we're able to provide better value, better service. We have a better business model, meaning that we don't have board of directors that are paid. They are board of directors that are members of the credit union. They volunteer their time. They're invested in the credit union. And we are better for the community because we are able to do a lot of giving back. We're not tied to profit in that sense, where we give back our profit in the way of lower loan lower rates on loans, higher rates on savings, and a lot of community engagement. We offer the same products as a bank, so we do have checking accounts, credit cards, loans, mortgages, auto loans. We have an RV loan if anyone is in the market. That's a fairly new one, RV and boat loans. But that's all that I will say at the moment about the credit union. I do want us to get us started. We do have a good amount of content that we want to go over. And really, what I want us to talk about before we get into the different pieces that we'll cover today. So we'll cover a little bit about financial, we'll talk about fraud and what to look out for, and just tips throughout. But the first part that we want to address is just setting the expectation that it's going to be a tough conversation. It's going to be, it's not, as we age, a lot of times it's not necessarily as we age, it's not necessarily as easy as we sometimes expect. It's an adjustment for everyone. It's an adjustment for us as we age, and then it's an adjustment for us as caregivers. So on both sides of it, it's an adjustment. And at times, you're going to have conversations that you didn't think you were going to need to have. Hopefully, you can have them before they're pressing, so they're not as overwhelming. But we do want to recognize that being a caregiver, there is stress that is associated with that. And it doesn't mean that you don't love or care for that person that you're taking care of, but it can sometimes be very challenging. I can speak for myself. I'm the caregiver of my parents, and there are times that I have shed a tear or two, if not more, or I have just been slightly frustrated because it's taking time away from work, or it's, feeling guilty that I feel stressed. So there's a lot that goes on when it comes to being the caregiver, but there's also a lot that goes with having to now feeling like you now are losing control or giving up more of your day-to-day, day-to-day activities, and having to have someone else come and help. So we want to acknowledge that it can be, and most often is, challenging. Then you bring in family dynamics. So we are going to do our best to address all of these, but we do want to talk first to just say that we know it's not easy, and we know that these are challenging conversations. And with that, one of the first recommendations that we have is setting the expectation within your family, within your household. If you are the person that is the elder, who do you want to be doing the caregiving? If you have children, how will that be split? If you have children that are closer versus children that are in a different state, or maybe you don't have children and they're friends or other relatives that are going to be help providing that care, what care do you want, and who do you want to provide that care for you? And if you are the caregiver and maybe you have siblings or you have others, what are the expectations that the family or the individual that's being taken care of have for you, and what are the expectations that you have yourself? And we want to also say, when it comes to caregiving, most of us don't go from 0 to 100 when it is, and that's on both ends. You don't go from, and I say most, there are definitely situations where life happens, people will get sick unexpectedly, a fall. Falls are very common. They're actually one of the top reasons that individuals end up needing caregiving, because there's a fall in the house. And or fall, it could also be outside of the home, but falls in the home are one of the most common. But most people don't go from 0 to 100. You sort of ease into it. So it might be that you start by taking someone to a doctor's office, taking someone to the groceries, or picking up groceries for someone, or driving someone around for errands. And slowly, those responsibilities continue to be added on, and that caregiving, you slowly ease into it. And that's also important to address, that sometimes people will say, well, I'm not a caregiver. The fact that most of you are here on this presentation, that I saw most of you are caregivers, that's great. You already identify as a caregiver. But just so that we're all on the same page, a caregiver can be anyone that is taking any level of care. And that could be, as I said, maybe picking up groceries. During COVID, a lot of us have been caregivers to neighbors, maybe just checking in on them, or running errands for them so they're not having to do that. And all of those errands and all of the things that we may think, oh, that's just a small thing. Well, that is a beginning of a caregiving relationship. And relationship is going to be a big focus, especially Sarah will talk a lot about caregiving relationships in her section as well. But developing the relationships, and yes, we're going to talk about the technical pieces. We're going to talk a little bit about fraud, estate planning, titling, etc. But we want to remember to focus on the relationships. We are taking care or being taken care of by loved ones. These are people, these are relationships, and that is one of the primary things to keep in mind, that this is about the person. So what are some of the different components that go into caregiving? We sort of thought of three general components. There's the medical care piece, as in what doctor what's the team of doctors that individual will have, or that you will have as an elder. Do you want home health care? Do you want the option of going to a nursing home? But we are not going to focus on the medical piece. Yeah, Sarah and I are always going to be honest with you, and we don't have that expertise. So we aren't able to provide that. We are going to provide some general resources, and doctor's office will tend to have a lot of resources. Employers do as well, for all these other components that we'll go through. And then there's emotional well-being. I spoke a little bit about this earlier, and the fact that you as a caregiver, and you as an elder. So again, we do have folks that are elder and folks that are caregivers on this webinar. You will need emotional support, and that is okay. We have experienced through the past 18 months, a lot of people have started to do more virtual therapy, or over the phone, or even in person if their doctors allow. And that is something that I'm very glad to see, that it's no longer being stigmatized, that people realize that emotional well-being is very important, and it is going to be important when you are caring for an elder, or when you're being cared for yourself. Because as I said, it's going to be an adjustment. There are going to be things that it's going to take time, little things that maybe didn't take as much time before. And I'll say something, as simple as getting out of bed, like just getting up, or standing up from a chair. As an elder, that's going to take us a little bit longer. And as a caregiver, now we're going to have to plan to take some maybe personal days off to provide support for that individual that we're caring for. And that can create some stress. It can, harbor some resentment if not dealt with. And we just want to make sure that you know that there are employers, religious groups, there are city support groups that are available. And the support groups, it's a couple of different reasons. You're going to be able to just have conversations with others that are going through something similar. So the sharing in itself can help, but you also are going to be able to pick up skills. And this is both as the elder or as the caregiver. You'll be able to pick up skills to help you through these times. And those skills are going to make you more confident. So when you're in a situation, you're not feeling as overwhelmed. And that is what happens with most things in life. When we don't know what we need to do, it's very easy to become overwhelmed. If we have never driven before and we are giving the keys to a car, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. I have no idea how to do this. Um, Similar with anything else that we do in life. We don't know until we get the skill sets, and support groups are a really great place to give us the skill set and to even help us be advocates for ourselves as elders and for our caregivers as well. Advocating is going to be a big piece. And the reason that I say this is, as the elder, you want to make sure that your voice is heard. You want to feel confident and comfortable voicing what you want and what you don't want. And as caregivers, you're going to have to advocate sometimes because the elder may not feel comfortable, or maybe because others in the family or others in that caregivers network may not be doing as much as you'd like. I can give an example personally for myself. As I mentioned, I'm the caregiver for my parents, and my mother recently had a horrible ear pain for months. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. We went to one doctor, and the doctor, and I understand doctors are busy, but this doctor in particular basically saw her for 5 minutes, didn't even look in her ear, didn't tell her to do anything or get any additional testing. He basically like wrote it off and was like, oh, it's because you have lockjaw. And it was some jaw pain that he said that's the reason for her ear pain. And I could see my mom visually getting upset because she wasn't being heard. So in that moment, I knew it's like, okay, I have to advocate for her. I have to say, well, doctor, you know, she's not feeling well. And then I had to say, Mom, can you elaborate a little bit more? And we decided, had a conversation with my mom outside so that she would be more comfortable, and decided, you know what, let's get a second opinion. Fortunately, we went to another doctor. After many tests, she is now doing much better, but the new doctor was able to find what was wrong and helped her. But a lot of that came truly because we advocated for her. She advocated for herself. I advocated on her behalf. And when we went to our primary doctor, they helped us by letting us go to a different doctor. So, but what we're going to talk about today, and there will be pieces that you're going to have to advocate for the financial support as well, but that's really what we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on the financial piece because that, as a financial institution, that is where Sarah and I have more of our expertise. So we're going to just start off with talking a little bit about estimating possible financial needs. Now, when these are things that if you're the elder caregiver, we can all do this. Even if you're 20, if you're teenager, like all of us can determine our budget. And this is something that does not change. So hopefully you've been doing this, so you're already in practice. And if you haven't, that is okay. This is just another opportunity. Now, estimating the financial needs is going to be a good component. And one of the things that I like about the planning of creating a plan for an aging plan is that the financial pieces are things that we can mostly control. They're going to be the healthcare, that's going to be challenging, the emotional, that's going to be, we don't have as much control. There are things we can do to help, but we really don't have as much control. Financial needs, especially when we do it with time, we have much more control over most of these. So what are some things that we need to budget for? Needs a budget for additional medical bills. As we age, I always joke with my dad. It's like, I joke. I was like, Dad, you're like an old car. You're just all these different parts now. And, sometimes things will need you'll need a little bit more engine oil changes and such. And as a result, it's have to budget for that, have to budget for additional prescription costs, but also look to see what we can do what resources we can take advantage of to help bring those costs down. And we do have a great website, which I have towards the next couple of slides, where you can actually go and you can put in your zip code or the zip code of the elder that you're caring for and see what discounts are available specifically for medicine, in addition to other, but they are medical discounts. And then budgeting for possible entertainment, travel, hobbies. I like to think of this as sort of the fun things like, okay, as we age, where do we want to spend our time and what is that cost going to be like? One of the things that I will say, I recently was with an older couple and they're in their early 80s, and they were telling me that something that they now have to budget for because they are older is what they do a lot of cruises, or at least they did before COVID. And they mentioned that they had to always take additional travel insurance because they knew that because they were older, they may get sick or they may need some sort of medical care, and they didn't want to have that stress. So there's the financial piece of it, but there's also the emotional stress. So what they did was they planned for it by getting additional travel insurance. And I thought, I was like, wow, that's such a, yes, it is an additional cost, but to them, it gave them the peace of mind that they felt more comfortable traveling. And additionally, they knew if they were to get sick, that travel insurance would help them, whether it was if the trip had to be postponed because of surgeries, which it had in their specific case, or if they were to get sick while traveling. Then another one that's really popular is the housing, and this means Is the elder going to relocate? Are you going to relocate as a caregiver? Um, I know, Sarah, I hope, and not to put you on the spot, but would you mind? I know you had a situation that you mentioned about, I believe it was your grandmother and relocation costs.
Sure, yeah. So, um, my grandmother lived in a city not too close to either my dad or my aunt. And for a while, there was care in the home that they could pay for, but then they found that they wanted to be closer to her and she wanted to be closer to them. And so they found that there was a need to budget for a relocation for her up closer to where my aunt lived so that my aunt could be there on holidays, things of that nature, as well as seeing my grandmother's great grandchildren, which was such a blessing. So, having that budgeted already before they had to make that move for emotional need as well as a physical need to be closer to each other, they were able to have already put that in their budget many years prior because they no longer had to pay for the in-home care for my grandmother, and they were able to allocate that piece of their budget then to relocation for my grandmother. So it definitely is important to make sure that you're estimating those financial needs and also realizing that those needs fluctuate over time. Sometimes you won't need as much in the housing budget, but maybe you'll need more in the entertainment or travel, whereas you'll need less in those once an elder has more settled down and is ready to spend a ton of time with maybe their great grandchildren or things of that nature. So really the ups and downs of those budgeting needs are what's going to need to be estimated.
Thank you, Sarah. And some other costs to consider, the legal costs, the funeral costs. We know these are not the exciting costs that people want to think about, but I have had a couple of family members, unfortunately, as many of us have during these times, pass away. And the unexpectedness of it, in addition to dealing with the emotional piece of having to mourn a lost family member, and then, okay, how do we pay for this funeral? How do we pay for this and everything else that comes up? So even though it's not something that we look forward to, we don't want to think about having to pay, plan our funeral costs, having to pay for the legal costs of titling, or maybe depending on the assets of the individual, possible estate planning. So creating wills or different trusts, whatever it might be based off of that individual's finances. it will it will benefit everyone to do it earlier and to continuously check in on them. I mean, we're not saying create a legal document and don't look at it for years to come. Hopefully the individual lives longer so that it can be revisited multiple times, but it's better to do it sooner when it's not hopefully as needed than having to deal with it when that individual passes or gets really sick. And some of the things too to think about, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in one of the upcoming slides, but I think this is a good time to talk about this. A lot of times people will think, well, it's going to be fine when we'll deal with it later, but and then they don't realize that sometimes dealing with things a little bit later, such as something that's very common in elders, it's common as most of us age. So not just elders, most of us, memory loss. We start losing memory, and people may not always remember what accounts they might have. I know, I mean, how many of us have to keep track of so many passwords? I'd be very impressed if anyone here knows all of their passwords to something. I feel like I'm always having to reset a password, and just thinking that that's not going to get easier as I age, it can be challenging. But what ends up happening sometimes is that individuals don't aren't added to accounts, or the estates aren't planned for, and then when the individual dies, excuse me, when they pass away, the caregiver may need to go through the legal courts regardless to get guardianship, or when the individual gets maybe too sick or is unable to provide for themselves, and that in itself can have significant costs. And now you're having to bring in lawyers and you have to go to court, and it could be much more challenging as well. And then one of the things that we do always think about with anything, whether it's planning for buying a home or planning for education or repayment of any sort, anything, is how are we paying for these expenses? And there are some potential sources, but and we understand everyone's financial situation will be different, but we thought it'd be helpful to just give you an idea if these are some potential buckets. Some of you may have more in one bucket than other. Now, the personal funds, this is going to go back to who is going to be providing the primary care? Will it be a group of individuals? Will it be the elder because out of their savings, or do they not have the funds? So it's going to be more their network or maybe government support. Now, for personal funds, that would be your savings, current income, any retirement income that that elder may have. And if you are looking at retirement income, one thing that I would always recommend, and this is something we could all do, we can all benefit from doing this, is having a conversation with a retirement planner, a retirement professional, someone ideally who is managing those retirement funds, to know what is the strategy. I know I recently completed a certificate in financial planning at Boston University, and one of the things that always was taught to us was keeping in mind that a lot of times when people are doing planning, or specifically retirement planning, it's all based off estimates at the end of the day. But you're trying to figure out, well, am I planning until 90? Am I planning until 100? You know, most of us fortunately are living longer. We're getting to be healthier for longer. But that means that if we're living longer, that money has to last us 10, 15, 20 more years. So if that's the case, what assumptions do we need to be making now? How much do we need to be taking out now? I've seen this with close friends as well that had retired, that they started taking out a little bit too much money in the beginning and then had to go back to work, even, you know, part-time. They had someone that I knew that started pet sitting, and it happens, that is life. However, we can try to plan for it so that we're not in that situation of, oh, I think I'm in retirement, I think I'm good, and then it's like, oh wait, actually I need money for much longer. And then you will see people that will talk possibly about borrowing and credit cards. Credit cards and loans, it can be tricky. Be very honest with you, it can be tricky for a couple of different reasons. As the elder, if you are now borrowing, that could impact your ability for when you need additional funds later. And unfortunately, and Sarah will talk about this, we've noticed that there can be fraud sometimes when sometimes family members, unfortunately, will have an elder borrow on their behalf, but then that elder, depending on even the type of loan, they could have wages garnished, they could have, excuse me, not wages, they could have government benefits garnished, and that could ultimately end up hurting that elder. So if you are an elder, I would caution you when you're borrowing on behalf of someone else, and if you're a caregiver, being aware of what loans are under their name. And then there are government benefits. I'm not going to get into too much of these. I do want to point out a couple of the different things. A lot of times individuals will say, well, it's okay, there's Medicare, there's Medicaid. Medicare, for most individuals, there is a co-payment, or there is a monthly premium, I should say, sorry. There's a monthly premium that is paid for most individuals. So just because someone qualifies for Medicare, which individuals will do at 62, that does not mean that you're automatically not going to have to pay for it. For most individuals, they still have to pay for Medicare. There is Medicaid, which is federal and state program, but that is meant to be aid for those that are in the lower income brackets, meaning individuals that are perhaps earning, for Medicare, if you're in a family of two, so let's say a couple, then that household income would need to be, and specifically I just looked up for the state of Mass, under $23,000 per year, or before taxes. And if you're one individual, that would be under $17,000. And then there's asset limitations as well. So for Medicaid, you cannot have more than 2,000 in liquid assets for individual, or 3,000 in liquid asset for a couple. There are certain things that you can potentially have, such as the value of a home and some other assets. But the point I want to get across with Medicaid is that not everyone will qualify for it. So I wouldn't want folks to depend on that. And if you're not too sure about it, there are many different resources. We'll point to some that will explain Medicaid in a little bit more detail. And then there's the Social Security. Social Security has been in the news significantly the past couple of weeks, and it probably will continue to be. For Social Security, as of today, as of 2021, the maximum that someone can get if their full retirement age were for 2021 meaning that they start taking retirement and they waited until their full retirement age, which for most individuals is 67, they're going to have about $3,000 a month. And that, especially in where we're living, it's not that much money. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't gladly take a $3,000 a month. Yes, always. But $3,000 a month to live and to pay for all these expenses, for most of us, it may not be enough, especially if we want to have a more relaxed life and not have to have as much stresses. And then there are private financing options. There's long-term care, which is care that would cover non-medical expenses. So if you're thinking about at-home or nursing care, assisted living, these are funds that you would pay for and then be able to essentially pay for it before you need it. And then you're able to have these costs help with meals. They can help with adult daycare. So there are a lot of different things that long-term care can pay for, but you do have to plan for it ahead of time. Reverse mortgages have become fairly popular in the past couple of years. Essentially what it is, you take the equity, and this is for the elder specifically. So if I were an elder and I had a mortgage, I would, if I wanted to, I can look into a reverse mortgage. And let's say I have 20% of equity, I can essentially have that equity paid to me monthly. But there are fees that you have to consider there. So even though that equity is getting paid to me, yes, it provides cash flow, but now there are fees that I have to pay to access those funds. And now the loan or the mortgage that I have on my home is going to increase, meaning I'm going to have less equity because I'm utilizing those funds. And if I have family members that I want to leave assets for, my house is not going to be one that I can consider. So if you are considering something like a reverse mortgage, we definitely encourage you to take a further look at it, and know that you want to be aware of all of the potential pros and cons with them. I'm not going to get into too much about, actually, I'm not going to get into at all life insurance and trust. I am going to ask Sarah, I know we have a couple of articles, one of them about estate planning that we're going to put in the chat. I will say when it comes to any of these, you want to make sure you're working with a professional, and you want to make sure you're working with someone that understands these benefits. And one other resource, I mentioned this one earlier, that we have is the National Council on Aging. You can provide your information as the elder, or you can provide the information on behalf of the elder. So the elder doesn't have to necessarily do this on their own, but you can put in your zip code. I've done this, and a wealth of information will come up of resources that are available in your specific area. You do not have to, the National Council of NCOA, National Council on Aging, they will have this option for you to sign up to get an email. You don't have to do that. So you can actually just go in and do it. It's on the left-hand side. It says no thanks, so you don't have to. But then you can choose what kind of benefits you want to learn about. So if you want to learn more about food and nutrition or tax options, healthcare, which we talked a little bit about earlier, that information will be provided to you. This is also a really good resource if you are thinking about relocating, or if the elder is specifically thinking about relocating, because you can see what other neighborhoods would have. And getting the paperwork is going to be a big piece. I talked briefly about this before, but knowing what accounts are open, this is something that happens to individuals even if they're not older. We see a lot of younger folks doing this as well, not knowing that maybe you have a retirement account that you started when you were your first job out of college and didn't realize that it did not roll over. So you may have funds somewhere that you're not even aware of. There is in a couple of websites, and we have on our blog an article where you can go to different websites to see if there are accounts that are essentially that have money that is owed to you. Maybe you have moved and the holder of those accounts don't have your current information. This is something that we do at the credit union. You have to do this at every financial institutions have to do this, is essentially give the money that is, let's say Sarah had an account with us at the credit union and Sarah didn't do anything with that account. After a while, we may have to close it. It can get touch with Sarah, but the funds are being put, the state does hold on to those funds. So there is a website and we have a blog article that tells you where you can go to learn if there are accounts that maybe are open that you don't know about. We also have information about pulling your credit report. This is something that highly encourage everyone to do. I will put this in the chat so that you have it, but you can go to annualcreditreport.com, and on annualcreditreport.com, you can pull the credit report of the elder, or you can, with them, definitely don't want anyone to do something without the elder, or if you're the elder, want you to do it, make sure you're using a secure website. This is where you can see if there's any debt that's potentially tied to your name that you may not be aware of. Unfortunately, and Sarah will talk about fraud shortly, but unfortunately it's something that a lot of people, elders, are taking advantage, and sometimes if someone has their social security number, it is identity theft, that someone will take an elder's information and borrow funds on their behalf and essentially scam the elder. And then there are different account ownerships and access levels. I have to stress this because you may, as a caregiver, want to help, but if you're not on an account, you can't go into a financial institution and expect someone. Okay, sorry, I just saw a question that came up. Someone asked for us to put the link on the blog article. Thank you. So yes, Sarah did put that link in the chat, and I will also say it. If you go to our blog, it is Finding Forgotten Money. So if you go to blog.hbcu.org, Finding Forgotten Money, that is where you can see. And this is something that you can actually do for other. You can't get the funds, but I've done this for my significant other. I've done this for one of my best friends. I found money for a lot of people. I haven't found it for myself yet, but I have found money for other people. They have to do the paperwork. They have to get the funds themselves, but you can go in and usually find if someone in your circle may have forgotten money. So it's a fun little thing to be able to text someone like, hey, do you know you have money in this institution? But going back to the account levels and access, just because you want to help someone, you can't if you're not on that account. So you want to have a good understanding before there is a need for you to have this understanding of what are the different accounts that this individual may have. Everyone's a little bit different. I tend to like the simplicity of having not too many accounts. It makes it easier. I know as the caregiver for my parents, it's easier to me that they have basically 2 accounts and a credit card. So I can help them with them. The credit card with my parents, they're actually on my account with an authorized user, so I can see their transactions and help them manage the payments. It's essentially their card. I just help them with that process. But because it is my card, I can call the credit card company if there's any issues and help on behalf of my mother. I cannot do that on an account that is just under my parents' name. So that you want to understand that. And then there's also the possible power of attorney, titling different accounts, and estate planning. And this is where working with those professionals is going to be very, very vital. And this is why Sarah and I cannot provide specific information on that because we are not qualified to speak on that. We can tell you generally, like, yes, what is a fiduciary? It is someone that puts their interest last. So it's the interest of the elder, the interest that they're caring for, not trying to make money off of someone. And so we can tell you, yes, look for a fiduciary. They have a responsibility to provide good support and not be focused on how much money they could make. Estate planning lawyers, I've had the pleasure of taking classes with a couple of planning lawyers, and they know what they're doing. They're in it day to day. So you don't want to go to a lawyer that's not specialized in estate planning. It's just the reality. If that individual, or if you as an elder, you have estate and you want to make sure that your accounts are titled properly, that you have a will in place, you need to have that. And having a will in place doesn't mean that you're done. No, there's so much more than just having a will. And you also want to make sure you're in a trustworthy financial institution. We know that it can be overwhelming. Like, where do I start? How do I find a fiduciary and estate planning lawyer? There are a couple different things that you could do. One of them, for those that are employed and are caregivers, you can check with your employee assistance program. They usually will have lists of different estate planning lawyers or certified financial planners that they've worked with in that area, so they can help you through that process. It's not something that you have to go through on your own. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah, to talk a little bit more about the fraud piece.
Yeah, thanks so much, Migdalia. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you on. My name's Sarah Scruggs, like Migdalia spoke about at the beginning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about protecting elders from financial abuse, as well as other scams and frauds to just be aware of. And something that I do want to put out there is so much of this information that we're speaking about today isn't just for those in our community who are older. This is really for all of us, and we can be more aware of this as well. And even if you're not in a caregiver position right now, maybe there are older adults around you who need this information as well. So I highly recommend sharing this information. Once we do send it to you in an email, it will be recorded, as well as all this information will be put into a PDF. So send this information far and wide so that those folks in our community can learn a little bit more about these things as well. So what are some things that we can do to make sure that we aren't falling victim to scams and financial abuse, especially if we are on the older side? First thing is account alerts. Setting up account alerts, this means that you're in the know about all of your accounts. That way, if there are large changes that happen, if there seems to be money going missing, that way you know all about it. Or if there's possibly someone's gotten hold of your information, this can all be known by making sure those account alerts are on. You normally can set these account alerts through online banking. You can also ask when you go into the bank or financial institution next time, hi, how do I set up those account alerts so that they come to my phone and I know what's going on? You can set up a credit freeze if necessary. A credit freeze is something that you set up through the credit bureaus, so the 3 different credit bureaus. You would go and set these up online. This makes sure that no one else is getting access to your credit to apply for loans or credit cards. So this lasts for as long as you'd like it to. It doesn't end. But what it does is you set up a PIN number, and you can only receive a loan or borrow money if you have access to that PIN number. That is the only way you can borrow money. So you can set up a credit freeze, and it is free to do so. Making sure that all the financial documents that you do have, I know I have so many that I shred each quarter. I try to go through and do all of my paperwork and shred it. Any that need to be stored for safekeeping, maybe you have a safe deposit box. That's an important thing to have if you do have a lot of vital information on paper, making sure that it's in a safe deposit box or somewhere that is fire safe. Those are 2 important things as well. And then any financial documents that you don't need any longer, maybe they're online or you have them stored at your attorney's office or something of that nature, you can go ahead and shred those documents. Do make sure they're shredded. That is very important, that none of your information be just fully on a page in the trash. Protecting your personal information over the phone, online, and in person. There are so many ways that people can get our information now. Like Migdalia said, one of the tips that I like to use with people who are young, people all in between, is that it is so important that we use secure Wi-Fi networks when we are getting onto our online banking platforms, anywhere that you would use a password. It is so important that you use secure Wi-Fi and not open or guest Wi-Fi. So one of the things that you can do even this weekend is making sure that you or your elders' Wi-Fi is password secure. That is very important that their Wi-Fi is password secure. So hopefully you can make sure all of that's good to go this weekend. Don't rush into any financial decisions. Financial decisions more than likely don't need to be made in a split second. We can take time to think about them. One of the ways that scammers and fraudsters play on our emotions is by rushing us into a decision so we don't have time to think about it. And so maybe someone has reached out to you and said, someone called me on the phone, they needed my information, so I just gave it to them then. A lot of times what we recommend is if somebody calls you, asks you for information over the phone, always say, you know what, I'm not going to give it to you right now. I'll give you a call back and give it to you. More than likely, if it is a scam, they will try to push you into giving it to them now. And if they are not, they'll normally be totally okay with you giving a call to the number on their official website. And so that is really important to note, is that it's not time to go rushing into decisions. And then signing up for FTC fraud alerts. FTC.gov is the website where you can sign up for these fraud alerts. The FTC is the Federal Trade Commission, and any fraud that does happen, you should report it directly to the FTC or local law enforcement, who will then report it. But this way, it keeps track of what fraud alerts are in our area. So you can sign up for these alerts for your area, for the area of where your elder may live or where you may live, but I highly recommend signing up for those fraud alerts. Thank you, Migdalia. So unfortunately, I'm going to give you some statistics that I've found. Anywhere from 5.2% to 6.8% of elders have reported some part of financial abuse. And this is just a reporting of that. This is anyone in the United States 65 or older. And about $3 billion has been reported in frauds and scams from senior adults. But the estimated annual loss that isn't reported of elders is $36.5 billion a year. And so unfortunately, many of our elders and senior adults are getting scammed out of funds. And it is so important that we take steps to notice when there may be signs of financial abuse happening to elders in our lives. Again, these may not be your parents directly or your grandparents. This may be, someone you notice who's your neighbor, someone you see often at work or something of that nature. It is really, really important to take note of that. What are some signs? If a senior doesn't normally go to the ATM or doesn't normally take out large amounts of money at the ATM and they begin starting to take out all these large amounts of money, that could be a sign that someone is asking them for cash when in reality, they don't normally use cash in their day-to-day, or at least that amount of cash. So having unusual ATM withdrawals could be a sign. Purchasing gift cards. This one is extremely common. I mean, just the other day, I was talking with my grandmother and she was saying she got a call a couple years ago from some scammers. Initially, she didn't know they were scammers. They had told her that my brother was in trouble in a town near us and that he needed to get bailed out of jail. And she was so worried, she was caught up in the emotion of it. And they told her, we need Walmart gift cards so that we can go get cash and bail him out. And my grandmother was like, I don't think the jail takes gift cards as bail money. And she was right. She did the right thing and hung up. And so a lot of times scammers will ask for money in gift cards because you can't return gift cards to stores and receive your money back. So more than likely they will be out that money and scammers can just go ahead and use it. So purchasing a wide range of gift cards could be a bad thing. Any unplanned wire transfers. Unfortunately, some scammers may get into what we call romance scams or an online romance scam. This has been found to, affect people young, old, all in between as well. But this means that they have somehow encouraged this person to send them money because they love them and they want them to do well. They're playing on those emotions yet again. And those unplanned wire transfers can hurt quite a bit. We've seen wire transfers that can go up to, thousands of dollars that folks are losing. So I highly recommend just keeping up with your senior and letting them know that you're there for them if they want to talk about anything. Set an unpaid bills. If you know that this elder has plenty of funds in their account to pay bills, they should not be going unpaid, right? For whatever reason that may be. And make sure that you know, okay, how are bills going? Have you paid all your bills this month? Is there anything that I can help you with, keeping up with those dates or anything of that nature? Feeling anxious or rushed, a lot of my research told me that there is a sudden change in demeanor for many adults when they are victims of scams and fraud because they almost always know that something is not right, but they just can't tell what. And sometimes they're embarrassed if this has happened to them. I mean, of course, we all would be embarrassed if this happened to us. So understand that those feelings that they may be having could be assigned to something more. And then, of course, there is ultimately super devastating alteration of a will or a trust or a joint account. Um, and unfortunately, something I want to say to this point is that about half the time, senior adults don't know the person who is scamming them, so they're strangers. But the other half, unfortunately, comes from friends and family. So people that they trust. And you'll see this a lot with alterations of wills, power of attorney, and trusts, is that they may take advantage of the elder from their family member. Their family member may say, you know what, you really need to change your will to include me or get rid of this person in my family. That is financial abuse. And you need to make sure that you're taking care of your elder in a way that accommodates what they would like at the end of their life. So, what should you do if you think that you or someone you know is a suspect of or a victim of financial abuse? First thing to do is speak with that person. And if it's yourself, speak with a trusted advisor. Maybe that's somebody at your local financial institution. Maybe you've had a relationship with them. Maybe that is a son, daughter. Maybe it is someone you work with. Talk with them and really talk through what you think happened, go through those details, and then report any of this potential financial abuse to the financial institution because you wouldn't believe how many times at the credit union we have been able to help seniors watch out for this type of thing and work with those on the joint accounts, making sure that their accounts are put back in order and that we do everything in our power to make sure that we are not letting our seniors fall victim to scams. Make sure that any lawyers who may have changed any information know this information as well, and any others in their network. Maybe a neighbor could help them go to the bank the next time they need to complete a transaction so that you can watch out for any unusual activity. Then contacting the local authorities and social services. Like I said, most scammers don't just do this to one person. They're normally trying to get a lot of money, so they'll continue doing this until they've gotten the money that they want. So contacting local authorities is extremely important as well. We've given a lot of information today, ranging from things like trust and wills to things like thinking about financial abuse. And so we want to give you resources to take with you to learn a little bit more about this. We're going to start with national resources. There's AARP. AARP is something you all probably have in your mailbox, once a week, right? But this just gives general information about aging, as well as possible discounts and opportunities for seniors to take advantage of saving a little more money. So highly recommend that you go on their website, and that is through a membership. So you would have to join via a membership, but all of their information on their website is free for the public. You don't have to have an information or a membership to get that information. The next is the National Institute on Aging, or the NIA. The NIA does quite a bit of research on Alzheimer's and dementia. And so if you are working with an elder, someone you care for, that does have Alzheimer's or dementia, this could be a good place to go to look at the latest research, how a caregiver can take care of someone who is going through this. I know this has definitely been a resource for my parents when my grandparents were going through their struggles with Alzheimer's. So going here, seeing the latest studies was really comforting to them. The National Council on Aging, just like Magdalia mentioned, information for older adults as well as their caretakers. This has information ranging from things like trusts and wills, estimates of what you need to budget for the future. So really great website there. And then Social Security Administration, information about your benefits through the government. This is where you need to go if you do have questions about those benefits like Medicare. This will have that information there. We are based in Massachusetts, so a resource here in Massachusetts. We actually have a full website, pretty robust information on the Massachusetts resource page for seniors, and I'm sure many other states have this information as well. So I highly recommend that you look this up along with your state, maybe just Senior Massachusetts Resources or whatever state you may be in. You can probably Google that and find this. And one thing we want to leave with you all, we will have just a moment for questions. One thing that we want to leave you with, though, is that support is available, not only at financial institutions like the credit union, but through your communities, your neighbors, the people around you that care for you. They want to help. So I definitely recommend leaning on other people through this journey. Like we said at the beginning, that is so important that you have a group willing to talk with you through this. And it is important that not only are the caretakers supported, but also those being cared for. Some resources before we go as well. Green Path Financial Wellness is a nonprofit that we partner with at the credit union. We pay them so that everyone in our field of membership is offered free credit, budget, and COVID-19 counseling. So if you want to set up a budget for a possible senior in your life, this could be a really great opportunity for them. So I highly recommend doing this if you have time on your hands, hbcu.org/greenpath. We also have a blog at the credit union. This is updated normally 3 times a week with different information. It definitely has scams and fraud information on here as well. So if you're wondering about the latest scams and fraud, this is a really great resource to use as well. And we do have one website that I will post in the chat now, one blog, excuse me, that's on elder fraud and how to stop it. So of course, a lot of this information was given today, but a really good resource for those if you want to share it. And then we do ask that you fill out this survey for us, just so that we can know how we can make this presentation better in the future. For us, this is something that we're always learning and working on. Just like most things with finances, you're not a complete expert the first few times you do it, and we are so thankful for you all for being here today. So if you could just fill out this survey for us, it'll take maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And of course, like Magdalia said, our expertise is in general information for everyone in our field of membership, not necessarily on your specific situation. So we want you to speak with those who are certified in that advice, such as tax, legal, and investment advice. And now it looks like we just have a couple of minutes to answer any additional questions that came in. Magdalia, I don't know if you see any questions on your end. But if you want to answer those, you can always go to our website for any up-to-date things and all of our social media channels as well.